very special guest today, Philly Fed President Charles Plosser. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Carl, thanks very much. I'm here in Philadelphia with the president of the Philadelphia Federal Reserve Bank and an influential member of the FOMC, and also on the communication subcommittee that created all these new changes. Thanks for joining us, Charlie.
Great. Glad to be here, Steve.
Let's talk first about your economic outlook. The statement seemed to be very pessimistic and almost seemed to ignore the better economic data that's been out there. What's your take on it?
Well, I thought it was a little bit pessimistic. I would have preferred a little more optimism in the statement. I think the outlook has improved over the last several months, and it's not that we're going to take off like a skyrocket going into this year, but I do think that the things are looking better. The employment picture, the employment market, labor market looks a little better, and I think there's reason to be hopeful that we're going to make this continuous modest progress towards recovery.
Give us an idea of your GDP and unemployment outlook for this year, 2012.
Well, I'm looking for GDP over the course of 2012 and 2013 to be only about 3%, which is a little above trend. It's not an outrageous forecast by any stretch of the imagination. Many people are a little below that, maybe at 2.5%. But frankly, the difference between 2.5% and 3%, our ability to forecast with that degree of accuracy, is pretty poor.
How about unemployment? What happens there?
Unemployment, we've seen unemployment fall almost a full percentage point in the last year. The last time that happened was 1995. And it never fell a full percentage point in a year after the 2001 recession. So I'm a little more optimistic. I mean, I think we could be, by the end of 2012, I think unemployment will be close to 8%. And on my better days, maybe even a little below that.
Let's talk about these interest rate forecasts that you're now publishing.
Right.
There seemed to be some disagreement between the statement, which said that you expected to remain low through late 2014, and the forecast that came out later in the day. Right. Which should the markets believe?
Well, I think two things. One is the interest rate projections in the SEP are not forecast. People have to remember that they are projections of what each individual committee member thinks is appropriate policy. That is, what should policy be, not what will policy be. And so they're making individual assumptions about the path of policy. And that reflects how, over time, that will reflect how policy evolves and the views of the committee evolve. In terms of the statement is a statement of policy. It's a statement by the committee, and it's reinforced by a vote of the FOMC. There's information content in both of those. If you look at the SEP projections of interest rates and policy decisions, you will see that there's a huge mass of people in and around 2014, and some beyond, and some people sooner. So it's not clear that the statement didn't reflect the modal view of what the committee and participants thought. But they are different exercises, and so I think it's very important we understand the differences in our projections and the policy statement.
If you watched the way the market reacted, they thought great at 12:30 when you said you expect to remain low through 2014, but then we learned at 2 o'clock that there's not very much support for that later date on the board. Which is the right one?
Well, I think the fact of the matter is the statement's pretty clear, although not as clear as it could be, that late 2014 is contingent. It is conditional on the evolution of the economy. Now, I think that we don't make that clear enough. A lot of people have been reading the statement as if it was a commitment, and it is not a commitment. And when you look at the SEP projections, it's pretty clear that everybody doesn't agree that this is a firm commitment. So it's not a commitment, and it shouldn't be interpreted as a commitment. It's a conditional statement, and I think revealing the projections in the SEP make that even clearer that this is really not a commitment. It will depend on how the economy.
One of the things that was most interesting about it was there were 6 individuals who thought that who projected the first rate hike in 2012 or 2013.
Right.
So I have to ask you, which one are you? Are you in the?
Well, I'm certainly in that 6. You can't read many.
I want to press you though. Do you think the first rate hike comes 2013?
Well, I've said previously, even before this statement, that I thought there's a possibility that rate hikes would have to come before mid-2013. I was unhappy with the calendar date in the statement. I'm still unhappy with the calendar date in the statement. I don't think that's the right way to convey policy. I think it's not good communications. So I do believe that it's likely to occur between now and before mid-2013. Whether it occurs in 2012 or early 2013, I'm kind of up in the air about it. It could go either way.
But which one were you, though?
I was in 2012, late 2012.
So you think it could happen in 2012? If you had to choose,
if the economy evolves, as I think it might, then I think it's likely it might have to be sooner than that.
Let's talk about the board. The committee seems to be going in the opposite direction. As I gauged what was said by the chairman and other members of the committee, it seems like they're on the cusp of additional easing. Is that your forecast? Is that your read as well?
Well, I'm not going to tell you what the committee thinks. I can only speak for what I think. I've already alluded to the fact I think that there's a suggestion, if the economy evolves as I think it might, then we actually may have to raise rates sooner, not do more. I'm very concerned about policy. We keep saying that we've got to do more. We've got to do more. We're missing our targets. And there's some analogies of that, what I call accelerationist policy. For example, imagine you're driving down the interstate and you're going fast and it's kind of fuzzy outside. It's foggy. There was an accident this morning in Florida in the newspaper, 10-car pileup. We don't forecast very well. We don't forecast very well very far in advance. You know, as you drive down the interstate, you've got to make an exit. You don't know exactly where it is and you can't see very far in advance. But you know you're not there yet. So in policy, what we're doing now is, okay, we're not there yet, so let's step on the gas faster. A little while later, you're not there yet, let's step on even more faster. But pretty soon, you're going to get the flashing exit sign. And when you do, two things can happen. You either slam on the brakes really hard so you can make the exit to your destination, in which case you may get the 10-car pileup behind you, losing lives and disrupting the economy, or you step on it fast enough that you make the turn and you flip and you
Right.
disrupt the economy. If you don't make the turn and you go beyond the exit, you've got to go all the way to the next exit before you can turn around and come back, and you miss your goals. And then you run the risk of either runaway in policy, runaway inflation, distortions in the marketplace, bubbles, and so forth. So I think I worry about this accelerationist view that we have to go ever faster on the pedal of monetary policy.
Do you think they should slow down and the Fed should?
We need to be patient. We just need to stop thinking that we have to keep doing more.
What about the idea, though, that you're not hitting those unemployment rates, targets, and that inflation seems to be relatively subdued?
Well, that's fine, but the question is, will more inflation or more policy actually help those unemployment rates? That's the short-run question, and the question about whether or not tolerating or targeting higher inflation will actually help that unemployment target is a huge debate in the economics profession.
Do you think that Operation Twist and some of the other quantitative easing has helped in bringing down interest rates?
It certainly has affected some long-term interest rates, but we don't know quite what the distortions it's created, the misallocations of capital it may have created, as we focus on some sectors and not others.
There's a lot of talk about the distortions that are out there, that Fed policy is really punishing savers. Do you agree with that? And is it something that you think is useful or warranted for the overall health of the economy?
Well, I think the judgment has been, and the reason policy has been what it is, the judgment has been that for the sake of the economy as a whole, that we're willing to tolerate, if you will, that. But it's certainly true that low interest rates of close to zero are punishing savers. There's no question about that. But the idea of policy, that is to sort of get people to quit saving and start spending. And so that's kind of one of the objectives. But it is the people who are on fixed incomes. I think there are some real risks that if they can't get a return on their savings, they start liquidating their assets, liquidating their wealth in order to live. Well, that means that in future generations who would have inherited some of that wealth from their parents, let's say, aren't going to get it. Right. It's going to be gone.
I've also had portfolio managers complain to me about the Federal Reserve, saying, you're forcing me into a risk profile I do not want to be in.
Right.
How do you respond to that?
Well, I think there's some cases where that's probably true. I talk to money managers and financial managers and private equity people in the financial markets, and a lot of them do share the view that somehow in the stretch for yield, many people are taking unwise risks. Now, of course, the Fed has made very clear that at times we're trying to force people to take some more risk, but we can't control how that happens. And so by trying to push people into riskier assets, as we're trying to do with Operation Twist or with the asset purchase programs, we don't know the full consequences of that. And we could, I don't say we are, we could be breeding some problems for us down the road if we don't exit in the right time, and then we go past the exit and we have another credit bubble of some kind.
Would you make a case right now against the idea, which seems to be prevalent on the board, which is to buy additional mortgages to drive down interest rates and help the housing market?
I don't see a need for that. It's sort of counter to my intuition about us doing more, always doing more. It's we have one of the worst housing markets we've seen in a generation, and we've lowered interest rates to historic lows. We are extraordinarily accommodative, and yet the housing market is still in a funk. Do we think that lowering mortgage rates another 10 or 15 basis points will actually revive the housing market? I'm very dubious of that.
Charlie, I have just another minute here, but I do want to ask you a technical question here. You have suggested in the past, an economist said to me, these interest rate forecasts would be useful if I knew where they stood on unemployment,
right,
and I knew where they stood on inflation and GDP. Are you in favor of publishing the individual rate forecasts along with the economic outlook?
Well, I am inclined to say yes to that. I think there are other people who are not so inclined. They would, if we did something like that, it would clearly be anonymous.
Right.
We would not attach names to them. But it would be more helpful in helping people understand where some of these rate projections come from if you saw how they matched up with that same individual's output and unemployment inflation forecast. That would be very revealing information and be a sort of transparency. But it begins to get a little tricky about people then trying to play guessing games of who's who, and I'm not. So then there are people that are uncomfortable with that. Most of the presidents, by the way, if you listen to their speeches, are pretty oftentimes talk about this. Maybe not are very open about it.
Right. Charlie, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Great, Steve. Good to be here. Thank you.
Great. Carl, back to you guys at EC or HQ or wherever it is you are.
NYSE.
NYSE.
Thank you, Steve. Steve Liesman there with that exclusive interview. Taxpayer-owned mortgage company Freddie Mac is supposed to make owning a home easier. But is new research actually showing that Freddie Mac is changing its tune and betting against American homeowners? Stick around. We're back with that in 2.